All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Peterson. I'd like to thank you all for joining us for our SMA INSS PRISM speaker session entitled, How Can the U.S. Department of Defense Catch Up with the CCP Within 6 Months? I'd also like to thank today's speaker, Mr. Nicholas Chaillan, for taking the time to present today. But before we begin, just a few quick housekeeping items. So we'll have a Q&A session at the conclusion of today's brief. So during the presentation or during the Q&A, go ahead and submit your questions through ZoomGov's chat function. It's a chat icon at the bottom bar of your screen. Also, go ahead and submit all of your questions today to Ms. Mariah Yeager. Her name should be listed as questions-Mariah Yeager, and questions that aren't submitted to Mariah specifically may not be addressed, so make sure to send those questions to Mariah. Also note that your name is going to appear in the chat before your question, and it'll be read out loud before we address that question. So if you prefer for your name to not be recorded and on the record, go ahead and rename yourself by going to participants at the bottom bar of your screen, then more next to your name, and finally rename. So now I'm going to briefly turn the floor over to Mr. Michael McCloudzik, an INSS Senior Fellow at the National Defense University and the Editor-in-Chief of its PRISM Journal, to kick off today's event. So Mr. McCloudzik, over to you.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this session of the INSS PRISM Speaker Series supported by the Strategic Multi-Layer Assessment Team. As we've emphasized in the past, the purpose of this series, like its mother journal PRISM, is to map the evolving global security environment with insight and informed views from the policymaking, practitioner, and scholarly communities. Today's session will focus on the challenge of artificial intelligence. Russian President Vladimir Putin said, "Artificial intelligence is the future, not only for Russia, but for all humankind. It comes with colossal opportunities, but also threats that are difficult to predict. Whoever becomes the leader in this sphere will become the ruler of the world." The United States was until recently the undisputed leader in nearly all emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. That probably is not any longer the case. With us today to lead our discussion, we have Mr. Nick Chaillan, who until the last year was the Pentagon's first Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer. When he resigned last fall, he left with a bang and not a whimper, saying, "Right now, it's already a done deal. It's already over, in my opinion," referring to the race for leadership in artificial intelligence. Without any further comment from me, I'm just going to turn it over right now to Mr. Chaillan. Nick, if you're ready, the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and just to correct, I was the first Chief Software Officer in the department, not AI, but I guess AI was also part of my portfolio, so it doesn't really matter. But AI is, as you said, the foundation of probably the future of warfare, and it is very important for people to understand. I'm going to share a few slides just to help also with the conversation, but I want to make this a conversation and take questions like we talked about. So I think it's very important for me to be able to kind of set the stage. And can you see my screen now? Is that all good?
Yes.
All right. So, when I think of innovation, I think of the next battles we're going to have to fight, particularly against China and Russia, but really China is kind of leading. You see China taking very seriously the investment around software, and software is pretty broad. It's also artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing, but it ties back to the mission, right? You look at hypersonic, where China has launched 200 launches of hypersonic missiles, where we've done 9. When you start comparing also the velocity and the pace of IT, you realize pretty quickly that, back in the day, we could get away with, not moving as fast as we had to. And that was before the time where the velocity of IT went down to maybe a year of kind of pace when you look at what it takes to bring innovations to life. The cycles used to be 5 to 10 years, so the bureaucracy and the acquisition nightmares that we face in the department used to be okay, right? You could still get things done with that kind of pace. But you look at what's going on in industry, you look at SpaceX, you look at Tesla, particularly with the adoption of artificial intelligence, which is learning upon itself, right? So the more you can deploy, the more data you get access to, the faster you can deploy the updated artificial intelligence model in production, the faster it learns. So it's compounding upon itself, and is going to learn faster. And at some point, it's just basic math with the volume of people that China has, 1.5 billion people, and the fact that they are taking very seriously access to data, but also investment in AI. By December 2022, we estimate it won't be possible for the US to catch up, just physically speaking, in terms of pure numbers. So this is very concerning. They have the lead right now. They created, I don't know if you guys have seen, but they created the new Shanghai Data Exchange, where China is very smart again. And that's a tricky thing too. They are pretty smart people. They're not waiting for us to figure this out. And the exchange concept is very much like a stock exchange, but for data, where people now can, companies can share the data, and people can buy and get access to it. Of course, China was smart enough, and the CCP was smart enough to get access to all of the data being sold or exchanged on the data exchange. And so they get access to Fortune 500 data, Fortune 500 companies' data through that exchange. That data is then used for a lot of different capabilities, but all these innovations, whether it's tracking faces or payments, or in China you pay using your face now. You don't use a credit card. When you look at that kind of concept, it's all driven by AI, right? And that technology then we use, of course, with military use cases. Same thing for self-driving of cars, and that can be reused for drones and other things, and hypersonic missile avoidance, or more effective targeting, again on the hypersonic missiles. And the only way really to win or prevent or stop a hypersonic missile will be to leverage AI ourselves, to be able to reactively and proactively kind of estimate the movements of that missile, and then through defensive measures use AI to defeat the other AI. So it's AI fighting against itself. We find on the commercial side that AI is sometimes capable of doing things that the human brain is not able to comprehend. So that's a scary thought. There's an ethical piece of that, and unfortunately, the department has spent most of the funding today in AI talking about ethics. And I'm not saying ethics don't matter; they certainly do. But I can tell you something that China is not doing is spending all of their money talking about ethics. The Air Force just got appointed a chief responsible AI officer. Of course, we felt the need to add the word responsible for some reason, but that's not usually part of the normal titles. And it tells you that a lot of emphasis is put on ethics. And I'm not saying we shouldn't think about ethics. I would argue maybe 30% of your budget could go into ethics, but probably not 80-90%. And so that's a real problem. We should think about tangible outcomes. So I wanted to share first a few links because we have created a lot of great training and content. So on the website here, preventbridge.com/created-content, you're going to find a lot of videos, YouTube channels, and created content that I put together from my time in the Air Force and now outside of the Air Force. A lot of videos. I have guests on my show. The show is called In the Nick of Time. So if you want to register for the show every Tuesday, we had Preston Dunlap, the chief architect of the Air Force, yesterday. We're going to have Lauren Nussenberger, the Air Force CIO, Jay Bonchi, the Air Force CTO. We had Jason Weiss, the DoD chief software officer. So we always try to have pretty engaging conversations, talking about a little bit of everything from tech to acquisition to training and learning. And so if you want to also check out the software that I have, the mail website, we have a lot of created videos and content and training. And that's one of the pieces you'll see that I insist a lot. The continuous learning is so essential. We used to think of training as a once a year thing, or even worse, sometimes even less than a year thing. But I push my teams to get an hour a day to learn. And I think continuous learning is the answer when it comes to IT, and whether it's data science, AI, machine learning, DevSecOps, any software related cloud thing. Things are moving so fast. If you're not learning every day, you're not investing in yourself, whether that's paid through the government funding the bill or you taking the time to learn, you're the one paying the price. So I think learning is so essential, and unfortunately, there are still a lot of the curriculums that are so far behind. So we try to put together a lot of free content that people can access, so they can really learn and do deep dives on different topics. I think that's very important. So when you look at why does all this matters, right? If you look at innovation today, we're really fighting in a software-defined world. The innovation is less and less on the hardware side, although hardware still matters, don't get me wrong. But the fact is software is able to move much faster. And if you can decouple your updates of hardware and software and do just like Tesla does, where you drive a 3-4-year-old car, but you can get over-the-air updates of software every 2 weeks and get not only just gimmick new features, but real, actual, tangible outcomes. That is a game-changing concept. That's probably why Tesla is able to innovate so much, because now you can deliver new capabilities, get feedback from your end users, the fighter in our use cases, and see what sticks, see what works, where you want to keep investing, what you want to stop doing, so you can be agile and learn and fail fast, but don't fail twice for the same reasons. Of course, China, Russia, and North Korea are massively implementing what we call DevSecOps, which is kind of this development security operation cycle that is massively accelerated, where we don't have a wall anymore between dev and security teams and operation teams to be able to build software and move at a pace of relevance. That's really the only way to build software, in 2022. Trying to do things like we used to do with 5-year cycles and have a transition between the development and the cyber teams and the DT and OT teams and the production operation teams. That's just not going to fly anymore, because software has to continuously evolve and learn, particularly when you start implementing AI. And so, when we implemented this concept of a continuous authority to operate, which we created in the Air Force and now it's part of the entire DoD, we saved in 1 year 100 years of time. And I say we saved, but maybe we didn't save it. We just didn't waste it. China is not wasting it. So maybe we should think about, how we label this. But at the end of the day, we're saving about 12 to 18 months of time just with the ATO process. And that's per program, per 5-year cycle. We save an additional 4 to 18 months, really. It's a little bit more than 12 now, thanks to the continuous feedback loop that we get from the warfighters for every program every 5 years. So you compound that's a lot of time saved on a traditional 5-year cycle. You can also deliver multiple times a day. Teams like Platform One now deliver 31 times a day in production. That's not Facebook, but that's pretty good. We also save tremendous amount of money, but the time saving is also money, and that's not compounded here. But you see 12.5 million saved just on using enterprise services. We just waste a tremendous amount of money letting egos and teams reinvent the wheel instead of building enterprise services. You would never see that on the commercial side, where teams would use a join cloud, join data lake, and different capabilities. You could have options and not have a one size fits all, but you would not have every team on the planet building their own in a vacuum. And that's just not scalable. We don't have the talent, we don't have the money. So we end up with very poor integration, which kind of defeat the point of a JADC2, join all domain and control. How do you get to JADC2 if you don't have access to data and ability for weapons to talk to each other in a secure way and be able to do over-the-air updates and do all the stuff that the commercial side is doing every day, particularly in space and new modern domains. And so, we also wanted to bring best of breed baked in security. So we push zero trust, and you may have heard of that in the recent president executive order. Some of it I helped write. to push that kind of baked in day one security, but security that leads to actual security, not just compliance, but also that is continuous and assess and reduce risk continuously. So that's very important as well. So why this matters in numbers? I think that's where it speaks to people that still question whether or not we should do this. We've seen 106 times faster lead time between development and production. That's massive. 208 more frequent deployments, 7 times less failures, 22% less time spent on fixing things, 50% less time spent on fixing cyber issues, a mind-boggling 2,600 times faster recovery when we have issues, which really for a weapon system is so essential. That mean time to recovery is really the cornerstone of commercial companies. If you look at companies like Netflix, they have 700 microservices, only 20 are needed to watch a movie. I can tell you they're tracking very well and doing a lot of chaos engineering and trying to crash things on purpose to see how resilient those 20 can become. So they never have a downtime. That should be even more so the case for weapon system. We've seen development costs reduced by 40%, which means you end up doing 40% more for the same amount of money. And we see employees being 2.2 times more likely to recommend the organizations, but also a great way to retain and attract talent, which is a massive problem right now in the department. So when I left, I did my my exit letter. Some of you may have read it. If not, you can Google my name, and it is time. That was the title of the letter for me to announce I was leaving. That made a little bit of noise, but the whole point for me was to raise awareness. I was kind of tired of hearing the leadership in the Pentagon say, yes, we have to wake up, and we should wake up, and we will wake up, and then 2 years later there was no waking up whatsoever. So I wanted to continue to raise that awareness and really shine a light on some of the critical issues I was seeing in my time coming from the commercial side. I saw 12 companies before joining the government, first at DHS, where I was the chief architect at DHS, and then I was the first chief software officer, and I was also co-leading the DevSecOps initiative with DoD CIO for the entire department. And that's something I always try to do is create enterprise services that will apply to the entire department, because I see us competing more between services instead of realizing we're fighting against China and Russia. I just never understood this coming from the commercial side, all these fights between OSD and the Air Force, the Navy, Army, and now Space Force and the Marines. But it's just very toxic. I find it to be very toxic, and OSD is not able today to push for these enterprise services. The Joint Staff is kind of in the same boat. So we see every service building their own things in vacuums, and then we have to figure out how to connect them and create this JetC2 magical connectivity and access to data. It's just not going to work. In fact, if you look at JetC2, it's not a thing. Each of the services are building their ABMS and project overmatch and whatnot. It's all effectively the same things being built in vacuums, whether it's for connectivity, for devices, edge, for cloud. We created in the Air Force the largest cloud implementation when OSD was trying to build JEDI, we had over $1 billion spent on clouds, and dozens of teams and critical programs use it today. But yet, we've seen the Army and others still decide to build their cloud in a vacuum from scratch again. That kind of mentality is why we can't get where we want to be. So I decided to write an op-ed a few months ago in the Financial Times and kind of give the 5 pillars to catch up with China. And then the first one is really embracing agile and embracing failing too, because it feels like we're so afraid of failing, we're not taking any risk. And if we're not taking any risk, we're not innovating. If you talk to Elon Musk, he's going to tell you, hey, we're gonna do this launch. It's gonna explode, but we're gonna do it because we're gonna learn a lot. We're gonna have telemetry. We're gonna get a lot of data from this launch, and we know it's not gonna be perfect. We know it's gonna probably fail, but we're gonna do it anyways. And if we don't fail, we don't actually learn. So of course, they do it right. They do it without putting lives at risk, but at the same time, they still innovate. So the first pillar is really about agile and embracing end-to-end agile. And what I mean by that is in the contract, how we buy requirements. Instead of buying stuck-in-time requirements, we should buy skills and talent that leads to outcomes. So we can actually groom a backlog and use modern agile practices that really I've been using since I started my first company. I was 15. I'm 37 now, so 22 years. I can tell you when I was 15, we were using agile already on the commercial side, and yet we see the DoD still being stuck in the waterfall processes, and that's just not going to work. You cannot have a 5-year requirement cycle and a 5-year implementation cycle and think you're going to be able to compete. Even industry is, if you look at the space market, without SpaceX, we'll be still using, Russian rockets to send American astronauts to the ISS. How are we okay with that? How are we complacent enough to think that's okay is mind-boggling, but we were, until the commercial side came to rescue us. I mean, people are gonna say, well, we gave them a lot of money through NASA. Well, yes, but the fact is, if they didn't exist, I don't know if we would have that capability today. And God knows, we spend a lot of money on the DoD side on space things that don't always work out, or other things. So, I think we all realize that while the commercial US companies are leading in AI and space and cyber and many different things, the difference between China is that the US government does not have access to most of these technologies. A lot of these companies either refuse to work with the government or just find it to be so cumbersome that they decide to go elsewhere and focus on other markets like healthcare or financial sector. And so in the meantime, we don't have access to the best of breed capabilities, and we're stuck in time. So, China, of course, has the luxury of mandating their companies to do work with the government. But I think the more agile we become and the more we can fix that, it's going to be an essential piece of being able to move at the pace of relevance. And that includes the contracting and acquisition process, where Congress has to fix also the piece of how we get money, color of money, but also how do we palm and the fact that the Air Force and the DoD now is working on 2024 to 2029 funding cycles in 2022 is just mind-boggling. I mean, how do you even know what you're going to need in IT or in innovation if you want to be so granular and precise and create all these PEs? It is just not the way we would do this on the commercial side. So the first pillar is really embracing agile. The second pillar is investing in fixing our talent issues. And a lot of it has to do with investing in people, giving an hour a day for them to learn, understanding also that we can't just, put random people in random jobs. The department, for some reason, think it's all about managing people. And so we put, very well-intentioned colonels or lieutenant colonels in charge of cloud and DevSecOps and different things with zero background in it whatsoever. I doubt you're going to find Google hire, someone that has never built a data center or a cloud at home to, to become the head of cloud at Google. And yet we're doing the same, trying to build what is probably the largest instantiation of a cloud, of a private cloud, with people that have no background in cloud technologies. That just can't work. So we need to invest in people. We need to forget about ranks and put the right people in the right jobs and invest into the right implementations. We need to really start thinking of people as and as IT as an investment, just like we do with pilots. You would never let me fly a jet. Yet we have no problem putting someone in charge of cloud or IT in the Air Force with zero background in IT. So we should probably not do that. We should also create career path, and we're starting to do that. But creating career path with progression of pay and title is so essential as well. So we can progress, and people don't feel like IT is a dead end and not going to make it to a general officer and have to move to management roles. On the commercial side, you can be a distinguished engineer and never manage anybody, but yet you have a pay scale that's pretty high. Why don't we have that? We need government people that understand these things. It cannot just be contractors. I'm not saying we have to replace all the contractors by government people. The right ratio is probably 70% contractors, 30% government people, but we need to have some of that expertise in-house. That's very important. So that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3 is breaking the silos and the things I was talking about before, where the idea, and I kind of started with the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Secretary Hicks was smart enough to kind of take some action there, listening to some of my recommendations, and putting in place a new Chief Digital AI Office to merge Jake, the Joint AI Center, DDS, the Defense Digital Service, and the Chief Data Office, but also start bringing software into this and creating enterprise services, and kind of create a joint enterprise office that's going to bring best of breed cloud, data lakes, warehouse, cyber, zero trust, and kind of merge all these siloed efforts across the department. So we have a chance at building something that's going to look like JETSI too, and stop reinventing the wheel and kind of having people build things in vacuums, often driven by egos, not just incompetence. So that's number 3. Number 4 is really enabling the sharing, information sharing and public-private partnership. I mentioned how the U.S. companies are leading in current times, and we need to have best of breed. We have a few engagements, AFWorks and SpaceWorks and different things, but it's just not enough. When you compare to what we used to be doing during World War II, with the Bell Labs days, it was much stronger. ALPA, back before DARPA, wasn't afraid to take risks. Now DARPA is barely able to transition any program to production. So we have a massive valley of death, mostly because they don't use DevSecOps, and what it would take for someone to take a program. I looked at 27 DARPA programs when I was in the job. Only one was capable of transitioning to production without a massive lift. That's just not how we should build innovation. If you have DevSecOps built day one, you can go to production rapidly, get feedback, get real data, and you can build stuff the proper way and not in vacuums in a lab that's never get to the warfighters. So DARPA has to be completely redesigned and reinvented. But also we need to stop being so afraid of failing that anytime there's one issue, we stop for a year to study why things went wrong instead of just keep pushing. That's just not how you can innovate. And fifth, I think it's very important, looking at the recent debacle in Afghanistan and people getting away with a lot of different things. I think accountability and really making sure that we lead by example, and that leaders are held accountable when we make mistakes, and that we need to have transparency, and we need to be more open to the public when it comes to the risk with China. A lot of things are overclassified. So we see companies refusing to work with the US government because they don't know how bad it is. I would argue if we were more transparent and more open to sharing, and the FBI has been doing some of that recently. I don't know if you've seen yesterday the interview of the FBI director talking about the Chinese aggression in cyber. But the more we can have companies realize how bad it is and how bad China is going after us and stealing IP, targeting companies, targeting critical infrastructure and putting lives at risk, the more people will understand. I think the more people are going to want to come and make a difference and join the fight. So I think that's very important as well. So I think we need to be more transparent, and we need to stop overclassifying some of the basic things. So at least people are tracking that this is happening and they want to come and help us fix this mess. So that's the 5 pillars. And I think it's a perfect time for me to pause and see, maybe take some questions.
Thank you very much, Nick. That's insightful, eye-opening, and also distressing. Um, we have quite a few questions and limited time, so I'm going to forego any questions that I might have and go directly to Doug Marquis at the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, who asks, is there a comprehensive list of metrics to use in order to measure nation state leadership in artificial intelligence?
It is very, very difficult, right? There are some metrics in terms of adoption and scale and velocity. I think there's a few good basic metrics that are well understood, particularly when it comes to the velocity of scale and so the velocity of updating the AI models, and then the scale and adoption, right? And so the issue we see, for example, when we create AI models, they usually don't get spread across the department. There's no repository of AI models. So everybody is building their own AI models in vacuums. Whether China is going to have a more comprehensive approach of creating a catalog of AI models that can be reused across the different agencies. And so the sharing component is very well done, back to also the point of the Shanghai Data Exchange and all these things. So the more we can demonstrate and track adoption, reuse, and more importantly, the velocity of deployment and access to data. If you don't have data, you cannot train your AI models. If they can train faster, then you get behind. The more data you have, the better the model becomes, and the more you can deploy it faster, the more you can learn, and it compounds upon itself. So those are some of the metrics that people use. I don't think there's anything official yet, and that's also part of the problem, right? There's very, very little guidance. Like I said, the department focused most of the money on ethics and releasing some broad statement on how we should be thinking about ethics every time we lift a finger, which is fine, but there's just very little done on the mission side, and that's concerning.
Thank you. The next question is from Scott C. at the Defense Intelligence Agency. The quantity of population of China to the United States may not be the right comparison. What's your judgment on the role of innovation, specifically the US and Western approach to scientific method and culture of curiosity that gives us an advantage over China or other regimes where freedom of thought is more constrained? Do we not have an advantage inherent to how thought is rewarded, whether coding, scientific method, or creativity?
Yeah, for sure. And that's probably why we may end up winning, but I wouldn't just rely on that, right? I think it's always funny how we became so complacent that we just believe that democracy and our freedoms is going to be enough to make us win. And I think, we have to be careful too, right? We're still competing against 1.5 billion people. The fact is, just looking at numbers, whether or not we like it or we think it's a good way to compare or not, they have a massive number of talent. They're investing in kids very early at 7 years old and 6 years old in AI, ML, and very advanced courses where we don't, and so they end up having and producing way more scientists than we do. So just sheer numbers, there's that to pay attention to. I would say not dismiss the numbers. That's just a number game at the end of the day. More data, so they get more data. They also get more scientists. They get more people. They get more people to try things out with. It compounds, right? Tesla got better and better the bigger the fleet became. So numbers matter, right? Particularly with AI adoption. Now, does that just mean that by itself it's going to be enough for them to win? No, because maybe people are going to wake up and be able to decide to not listen to the CCP anymore. But I wouldn't bet on that, right? I don't think any of us should bet on that. That's a nice to have backup plan if we fail at everything else first.
Ed asks, I'm sorry, I skipped one here that I don't want to skip, and this is from Jimmy Lemon. You mentioned numbers and studies predicting December 2022. Where are those studies and numbers?
Yeah, so so I'm blanking on the name, but I will make sure to send an email after the call. But there's a study that came from an FFRDC, and I'm actually blanking on the name of the FFRDC that did the study. But that study came out last year, and was compiling kind of some of the data and the metrics, and the study had some of the metrics to measure AI. Back to the first question, And based on numbers, it seemed pretty clear that, I mean, of course, we could debate if it's December or June, but the fact is, time is running out. And for me, I would rather be too pessimistic than the other way. So I find us to be too complacent when I see reports saying we have 7 to 10 years to wake up. That's completely wrong. Those reports are not taking into account the compounding effect of AI. So that alone is wrong. And just we're just too complacent. I mean, we've seen it, right? The complacency is putting us at risk, and we're putting our kids at risk, and we just need to do better. And so I'll share when I find it back on my my notes. I'll send the link so you can send it with the group later.
Thank you very much, Nick. If you send that to me, and Jimmy, if you communicate with me at mclaujik@ndu.edu, I'll pass on that information to you. From Ed, we have a question. Where are the Air Force's greatest gaps in implementing DevSecOps to effectively fund, manage, upgrade, and keep pace of integrating AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning into C2 weapon systems and management?
It's a lot, right? So first, I'm very concerned that the leadership still has not replaced me. We don't even have an acting chief software officer, so that's a big deal, because I was already running the DevSecOps initiative, so that effectively means no one is doing it. My former team is just not empowered. You know, I had a chief of staff and a good team, but they're not very technical, and so it's been 5 months now, and we have not even conducted any interviews to replace me. So that's a problem. Two, Platform One, which is the main DevSecOps team for the Air Force, was funding in 23, but very little funding in 22. So we have massive shortfall in 22, particularly because of the CR. So and then, you know, Platform One stops right before AI/ML, and Jake had a great partnership with Platform One, but Jake has not moved fast enough to deliver what they call the Joint Common Foundation, JCF, which is supposed to bring this multi-tenant AI/ML capabilities, so we can share AI models like I was talking about. That's really the foundation of. We will not be able to get anywhere until we get a joint repository of AI/ML models that can be shared across the department. And so there are massive gaps. And honestly, the staffing, and I'm also very concerned because I can tell you, unfortunately, the number of people leaving that are very good and very capable on the government side particularly is as I've never seen something as bad as what I see now. And so we've lost, for example, 7 of the 8 founders of Platform One. They have left the government. That's very concerning.
Lieutenant Colonel Mary Bakti asks, how does faster mission delivery and better software and reduced development costs align with large company industry profit targets? And can you speak to capitalism goals versus national security goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know, that's also part of the problem, right? We created this defense industrial base bubble with the wrong incentives, right? Honestly, we pay. When I started in the job, I was always very good at estimating work and costs. So I would say, hey, you know, this feature would cost $50,000, and then we get bids that would be $500,000. So 10x was the average cost that the DoD would pay compared to what I would pay for the same thing on the commercial side. So that's concerning. That already means that the bureaucracy and the clearance nonsense and all the requirements we created around acquisition is making sure that we effectively spend 90% of the money on the wrong on bureaucracy, just because of the DIB and the fact that we lost a lot of diversity in the DIB, and with mergers and less and less people competing, and less smaller companies, particularly when it comes to software, right? I think you know, a lot of the DIB companies are just not very well equipped to write software. So obviously that doesn't align very well. And then, you know, you start comparing also with IP. You know, I was shocked to see the government pay for the entire cost of something, and yet not own the IP. That would never happen on the commercial side. On the commercial side, if you pay for something, you have a work for hire and you own the IP. If you pay, let's say 40% or something, 30%, even maybe 50% or something, you have a license to use the thing, and maybe the company keeps ownership of the IP. But I've yet to see the commercial side pay for something and then not own it. That's just mind-boggling. And so we let that happen for so long that now the DIB is used to owning IP they shouldn't even be owning. So that's a real problem. On top of that, people claim that the DIB will walk away if we decide to start asking for IP, or if we start asking to use DevSecOps. I've yet to see that, right? I think we like to pretend it's true so the DIB can keep making their money. But the fact is, what I see so far is every time we did a bid, even large bids, where like look at GBSD, largest nuclear program on the planet, and yet we mandated the use of DevSecOps in Platform One, and Northrop was just fine. Walk away from the deal. And we mandated open architecture, so there's no locked in on the IP there. So, I think it's possible, right? I think the issue is most of the contracts are not written right, and we end up not asking for it. So why would a DIB proactively decide not to make more money, right? The government has to be, protecting the taxpayer investments and be smart enough to buy the right things with the right conditions. And we often don't do that. We don't even have a good understanding of IP in the department, if you ask me. So, I mean, to align all this is tough. You're going to have to expand the DIB, and you're going to have to open the door to more companies. You're going to have to attract more companies. You're going to need to be more transparent to get them excited on helping. And if they understand that their children's future is at risk of getting into real tangible trouble, then they might want to proactively come and help. A lot of the software companies on the commercial side will be eager to come in and help. We also have to be smart in terms of cyber and compliance requirements. Some of them are just not smart. Some of them are not good enough. So we put the nation at risk with very poor cyber hygiene, but at the same time, we have tremendous barrier to entry for some companies to do business with DoD on just like anecdotal things that just don't make that big of a difference. So we created a massive bureaucracy to prevent fraud and prevent issues, cyber issues and other things, which really sometimes end up creating more problems than they're solving. So, the whole DIB has to be solved. If we don't have more options, we're not going to get there. But for that, we need to make sure the awareness is there for people to care. So.
Thank you, Nick. One of the Defense Department's initiatives to try to bring more companies, especially smaller, medium-sized companies, into the Defense Industrial Base is the Defense Innovation Unit out in Silicon Valley. What is your assessment of their contribution so far?
DU has been great. They've done a lot, and they helped a lot of VCs start to care again about DoD. But I don't know if you've seen, but as recently as maybe 2 months ago, a lot of the VCs started to write pretty alarming posts on LinkedIn and in the press saying that, hey, we've invested, but we've yet to see return on investments because DAU has not, and not just DAU, but AFWorks and all these DoD programs fail at transitioning past the SBIRs, past the first phases to PEOs and program of records that can consume the technology being built. We don't have any mechanism. It's mind-boggling to me how many times I had to personally say, hey, this company has a great product. We already funded their phase 2 SBIR. We don't even know it exists. And the top PEOs that would benefit from it never heard of it. So I have to be the middleman to introduce the company to the PEO or the PM of the program. There's no mechanism. Even AFWorks is not capable really today to say, hey, we funded this. Here are the 10 point of contacts. You should reach out. We should even streamline the reaching out portion because it's so difficult unless they have a federal salesperson to even know how to do that. But we don't even give them point of contacts. We say, oh, good luck. You have to find a MOU signed by one of the programs to get the next chunk of money. Good luck. That's just so short-sighted that we don't have dedicated teams to do the middleman. That would never happen on the commercial side when you have a VC. I had my own VC for 2 years. Most of my time was spent networking and helping my companies and my products find potential customers. Yet we don't do that in the department. We are fine giving them cyber and grant money and then telling them to good luck, and then have a tremendous lack of adoption past phase 1 and phase 2s.
From Clifford Zins, isn't there a risk and potential loss of resilience if there's a unified system? There's no diversification. If a system is breached or compromised and we only have one system, then there'd be a problem, wouldn't there?
100%. And centralized teams doesn't always mean a centralized system. So I think that's also something very important to understand. You look at platform one, we have 950 containers, so kind of Lego blocks of different things, 23 databases, 16 programming languages, right? So you have a diversity of options. We support multiple clouds, on-premise, on space systems, on jets, bombers. So with the right abstraction and the right orchestration, you can run the same software at multiple places and be very resilient. We ended up building a data lake and warehouse that could tie back to 5G, to Starlink for satellite, to the Microsoft and Amazon commercial backbone, which gives us access to all of their worldwide backbone, including at the edge, plus the internet with Dirty and just adding crypto on top. Dirty internet with crypto on top. And plus 5G. So we can make things very distributed and resilient. It doesn't mean it has to be 50 teams running it, right? I think the issue is we use that excuse as, hey, let's everybody do their own things in vacuums, instead of saying, hey, let's bring the best of breed of the cloud team of Navy, the cloud team of Air Force, the cloud team of Army, and create a single team that's going to have a diverse set of capabilities with diversity of options, different vendors, but it's still one team. It's still cohesive. There's proper communication and integration of data and connectivity and across all fabric and all domains. Now you're talking, right? So you get the enterprise vision, but you don't get the resilience issue. All of the cloud capabilities we built are more resilient than anything else I've seen in the department, because we can actually do it well with the right people and the right expertise. And you don't dilute your expertise into silos and tiny teams that are all building the same things in vacuums. So you can aggregate your talent, you can do better at building the capabilities, but yeah, you can have an implementation approach that creates that decentralization. If you look at platform one, everything is decentralized. We can run platform one anywhere, from a jet to a bomber to a space system in minutes. We put platform one on the U2 jet, which is 60 years old, in 12 days.
Zora from the Department of Defense asks, do you believe that what is funded needs to change from programs to capabilities to reduce duplication?
100%. Yeah, I think the issue with Congress is they're being way too precise in funding. You will never see that on the commercial side, right? When we get money for a CIO shop or pick your poison, the 2-3 year cycle can be agreed, and you get a bucket of money, but you don't get to define these buckets closer than a year. So now you can actually decide where you're going to spend the money for that year. And so if you have broader things, if you were just getting money for laptops and connectivity and cloud, and then you can be more precise, maybe for the year of execution, that would be the way to get it done, right? So Congress still gets visibility. And by the way, we created a metrics reporting mechanism at platform one when we can give real-time visibility on the spending of money of platform one to Congress. So they actually get more granular and more precise visibility on how the money is spent, thanks to proper metrics of tracking work, and down to the more granular level than the PEs. But they would have to agree also to give us more flexibility in funding things on a broader capability, less PEs, more capability driven. And then the year of execution can be more precise, but they would get also more visibility. So the carrot is, hey, Congress, we're going to give you more visibility in the year of execution, but hey, you have to be creating these broader funding lines so we don't get stuck in time. That's the answer right there.
Thank you, Nick. George Vogan at the Aerospace Corporation asks, do you think any of our US laws bring challenges to successful agile implementation and security of our national security systems? For example, companies are treated as US persons, and the government can't easily identify when a China, Russia, Iran, or other has compromised their software and let anyone who cares know without a lot of effort.
I mean, these actually, I think some things were missing, and I usually don't advocate for more laws, but I can tell you, TikTok, for example, is a weapon system from China, right? So TikTok now is valued at 650 billion. It's massive. The growth is insane. Most US companies now advertising most of their money on TikTok. TikTok admitted pretty much in front of Congress that all of the data is going back to the CCP. They would never let us do that, right? They would never let us, they don't let us have Google or Facebook in China, but yet we're completely fine letting China comes and build the largest social experiment, getting access to all our data on phones, what we look, what we like, what we feel, how we respond to things. It's a misinformation weapon. It's a data gathering intelligence weapon. They can easily get to know people and see how to infiltrate companies and track who is doing what and who likes what. And it is just mind-boggling that we let China do this. So I would argue we need to start taking US data and protection of that data. If you look at Europe, of course, with GDPR, they did that a long time ago. China is doing that, has been doing that for a long time too. Yet we're fine letting the US data flow back to China. So that's something we actually need more regulation and start understanding the value and the power, and also the military national security power of data. So we need more laws there. When it comes to the other side of the house, where we have some laws that sometimes think of just a front as a US companies can be consumed, but then you don't know where the provenance of the data or the software is coming from. I can tell you it's just going to be very difficult, right? A nation state is going to be able to get away with that. We use a lot of open source. It's actually safer to use open source because we have eyes on code, so we know exactly what's going on. Some people, don't agree with that, but I think the more we can see what's going on, the more transparency we have, the safer we are. If you compare to companies, China can hack a US company. I mean, you look at SolarWinds, they don't need to infiltrate the company with Chinese assets. They just tampered with the DevSecOps pipeline, and they managed to inject malicious code into the cyber product. So now you can have access to all of the networks. So there's just so many avenues for someone to get inside of our systems. If we start making it too difficult, also for companies to do business with the US government. You look at Israel, they have the most innovative cyber companies, period, in the world. Are you just not going to use Israel companies because they're not Americans, but yet they have the best cyber products on the planet? That's an interesting debate, right? I mean, look, I'm not going to use Chinese and Russia companies. I get that, but should we really completely wall us off of the rest of the world? Like, what if it's UK company, Australian company, Canada? When is it okay? When is it not? So I think at the end of the day, if China wants to infiltrate a company or they want to push malicious code, there's so many avenues other than just the provenance or the company identity. So that's a very difficult thing to solve.
If you don't mind, Nick, I'm going to quote you with my children, telling them that TikTok is a weapon system.
I can tell you my kids are not going to be allowed on TikTok, that's for sure.
From Anonymous, a question from an anonymous person. Given an advantage of Agile or DevSecOps is speed to fielding, the use of open source software can bring security risks, as anyone can have a piece of ownership in developing the software. Any recommendations on how to properly manage those security risks? Yeah,
so the speed to fielding is obviously key for DevSecOps. At the same time, it's interesting, right? Because open source is actually less risky, in my opinion. Closed source software first has probably 70% of the software being open source, and you don't even know about it. So you look at companies like Atlassian, 1,400 CVs on Jira alone, probably the most disgraceful product I've had to assess to get accredited for DoD. Yet it's the most used collaboration stack in the world, and yet they get away with 1,400 CVEs in their products. Closed source, we have no clue what's going on. I have no visibility. They tell me it's mitigated somehow. I have to trust them and hope for the best. 2 months ago, there was a tremendous CVE and dozens of companies got hacked. Confluence, one of the Atlassian product, had a remote execution CVE, and anyone could get into all the data and pretty much steal everything. And yet they get away with it. So it's a commercial product. We have no visibility. We hope for the best. We scan the stuff. It's a disaster. Yet we use it. Open source, I can scan it. I can see who's doing what. If we put the right resources in front of it, like we did for Kubernetes and different open source projects, we use that platform one. We embedded people from the government or from contractors from the government inside of the open source community to know what's going on. I can tell you we have way less risk than we have using some commercial product that we know nothing about. So, commercial product, it makes us feel better, and we believe the company is doing the right things. I can tell you when you look at dependencies, most of the companies can even tell you, despite the new cyber executive order on software bill of material, that what is inside of their software, what dependency they use, how old these dependencies are. I talk to cyber companies all the time, and they have sometimes 7 to 12 years old dependencies inside of their software, and it's a cyber company. They're selling a cyber product, and they are not even using basic software lifecycle principles to update the dependencies. Many of them are open source with tremendous levels of CVEs, but you scan the software because it's obfuscated and you don't have access to the source code. You don't see that. So you feel good about it, but guess what? China is already in the network because they know that this software is used worldwide, and they're going to target it even more than others. Look at SolarWinds and others, right? So don't think that open source is more risky. I would actually argue the opposite. If you do it right, you have to look at the provenance. You have to look at who are the contributors. You have to embed people to see who is making what changes. So that's how you mitigate the risk. But I can tell you, you cannot do that with companies. And companies are, when I assess them, and I assessed 750 companies in 2 years in my time in the government, all of them, 99%, including cyber companies, were a total debacle and disaster with a higher risk than most of the open source products. We assessed about another 400 open source products. The open source products were doing much better than the commercial companies.
Thank you, Nick. This last question for today's session is from Jim Krupe. What prevents us from building a Manhattan project for cyber as a major infrastructure project?
Nothing. That's why we have to do it. That's exactly some of my recommendations. Effectively, what preventing us right now is the complacency of our brains. Thinking when you have the leadership, including the chairman of the joint staff, say that the hypersonic launch was just almost a Sputnik moment, instead of saying, hey, it is a Sputnik moment and we have to take action now. That complacency from the joint staff and everybody else in the department, always dismissing and calling China a near-peer adversary instead of just saying, hey, it is a real adversary. And hey, by the way, they're leading in cyber, in AI, in ML, in hypersonic, in quantum compute. And that's going to be the next thing that's going to let them win the next wars. And if we stop that complacency, then we're going to have a Manhattan project. But then because people are dismissing the facts and what's going on and always diminishing the criticality of these things, then people are not waking up to have a Manhattan project because we feel good about ourselves and it's just not going to happen to us because it didn't happen for a long time. But guess what? We didn't do that well in Afghanistan. I can tell you against China is going to be a whole different story. And we're not going to be fighting against camels, right? So.
Thank you very much, Nick, for throwing down the gauntlet. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have to bring the session to a close. So please join me in thanking Mr. Chaillan for leading this insightful and disturbing discussion. And allow me to also thank the Strategic Multi-Layer Assessment Team for their constant support. Todd, Nicole, and Mariah, thank you. And NDU leadership for empowering us to succeed. And of course, I thank you all for joining us today. Thank you very much. Please stay safe, stay strong, and stay in touch. This is Michael McCloudrick for NDU signing off.
Thanks for having me.